Welcome to another episode of the Take Your Shot podcast. Of course, as always, I'm your wonderful host, Joshua Gitman. And on today's show, we discuss a superstar who bypasses a contract extension, plus react to the GM survey. That's all coming up and more on today's episode of the Take Your Shot podcast. And welcome back to the show. And let's start right away with that superstar. De'Aaron Fox of the Sacramento Kings is deciding to bypass a $165 million max contract extension as he believes he will get a better deal in free agency in 2025. Now, this is an interesting move because Sacramento, we know, one of the more disappointing franchises in the past 2 decades in the NBA, but they stopped their playoff drought in 2023, getting the 3 seed, losing to the Warriors in 7 games. Then last year, they had a disappointing season, getting the 9 seed and losing in the second play-in game to the New Orleans Pelicans without Zion Williamson. So now what do they do this offseason? They go ahead and get another star. They trade for DeMar DeRozan. And now the Sacramento Kings feel like this has been, right now, their best roster in years. But the problem is the rest of the West. The rest of the Western Conference is great. Of course, you know Oklahoma City, Denver, Minnesota, Dallas, many more teams that are clearly ahead of Sacramento on the food chain of the Western Conference. And this creates an interesting dynamic because some people might have been surprised that De'Aaron Fox didn't ask out earlier. And when I mean earlier, I don't mean 2 years ago when they were the 3 seed. I mean before they got Domantas Sabonis in the trade that sent Tyrese Halliburton to the Indiana Pacers. By the way, that trade has been an absolute win-win for both teams, one of the only win-win trades we have seen in a very long time. But it was surprising that with the whole situation with the point guards, Sacramento had 3 point guards they were deciding to play, and it just wasn't really working out. And maybe people thought that Tyrese Halliburton would have been the better direction for the Kings. You might want to move on from Fox. He's had a great season in 2022. Let's look to trade him and get some younger assets to further this rebuild around Tyrese Halliburton. Instead, they trade Tyrese Halliburton, get Domantas Sabonis back from the Indiana Pacers. And here we are where the Kings have a lot of pressure this season because this is not the Kings of old. As I just said, this is a new Sacramento Kings team. We have seen this exact team get to the postseason, and now they add a guy like DeMar DeRozan. Now you have Keegan Murray going on to year 3. This collective group now with Mike Brown as the head man going into year 3. This team should be more comfortable and more familiar with each other. And something that I really thought that the Kings were lacking was definitely that 3-and-D wing. No offense to Harrison Barnes, but he is not the player DeMar DeRozan is. And overall, the move is okay for Sacramento because, yes, you get that upgrade at the 3-and-D with DeMar DeRozan, but at the same time, he is older. You still have to pay him the money, and you never know when he is going to digress. But my case, if the Sacramento Kings miss the playoffs with this team, De'Aaron Fox should have every right to ask out. Because what has De'Aaron Fox done since he got drafted in 2017? He has put this organization on his back. Last season, averaging 26 points per game. Fox has been an all-star caliber player, even though he may have gotten snubbed last year. He has been an all-star. De'Aaron Fox is a high-level elite basketball player who has been literally carrying them up a mountain. The Sacramento Kings wouldn't have gotten to the top of that mountain if it wasn't for De'Aaron Fox. We know how explosive he is. We know how quick he is attacking the basket. We know his great shooting as well. His defense as well is also elite. De'Aaron Fox is a great two-way point guard, and that's the kind of guy you would want on your team if you were someone else. Now, of course, there's going to be teams following the story, a team that could potentially use an upgraded point guard. But the problem is with this new apron rules, that a trade for De'Aaron Fox is going to be a little bit harder than waiting in free agency. And even if you do wait in free agency, if you're a first apron or second apron team, which is most contending teams, you will probably not get De'Aaron Fox. So this situation now becomes a little bit tricky. Does De'Aaron Fox really want to leave? Or is this a leverage play? Because he knows it's going to be difficult to get on a team that is actually contending. He knows maybe a spot like, I don't know, throwing out a name like Miami, maybe a team like I maybe San Antonio, pair him up after Chris Paul retires with Victor Wembanyama. It is going to be a little bit harder to get him because of the extension rules. I was just throwing out names there, but those are just examples of teams who have a little bit of a cap situation where they do not have a lot of room for flexibility. So it's going to be tough for De'Aaron Fox to actually get out of Sacramento and go to a contending team or a team that's on the rise in free agency, which makes me think that this is only a leverage play by De'Aaron Fox. Why would Fox announce to the world that he is not signing this extension? Obviously, Fox wasn't the one who reported it. It was Shams Charania, but Shams got it from somewhere. He got it from his agent. He might have gotten it from Fox directly. This, to me, could get interesting if the Kings are really, really bad next year, which, of course, is a possibility considering how great the Western Conference is. But at the end of the day, this is a leverage game. Players are trying to get the most money possible. And maybe right now, the Kings aren't offering De'Aaron Fox exactly what he wants. So maybe he is announcing this to say, hey, I'm letting other teams know I may be available in the market in 2025. I may be able to come to your team, save up for me in free agency. I'm interested. I'm interested in a different direction, a different chapter in my NBA career. And that puts the pressure on the Kings to give him what he wants. And do I think the Kings should give De'Aaron Fox what he wants? Absolutely, because as I mentioned, he has been carrying this franchise on your back. You can't really get much better at point guard, at least for the younger generation, than a De'Aaron Fox. I mean, he has been great, and there is nothing else to say. But the Kings, as I mentioned, they are going to have a lot of pressure this season. There is no doubt about it. They do have a void at the bench a little bit. Yes, Malik Monk is a great sixth man, but other than that, who is going to step up for you on the bench? Is it going to be Jordan McLaughlin from the Minnesota Timberwolves? Is it going to be a Trey Lyles and Alex Len? Could it potentially be a Colby Jones? I don't exactly know who on Sacramento is going to step up, but what I do know is they are in the market for another move because the Sacramento Kings made an interesting trade yesterday. As I am filming this on a Tuesday, the Sacramento Kings decided to trade Jaden McDaniels and a second-round pick to the San Antonio Spurs for cash considerations, which basically means giving up Jaden McDaniels for nothing. Why would the Sacramento Kings do that? Well, to answer that question you ask, the Sacramento Kings did that to create flexibility. What do you think the Kings are trying to do here? They saw Fox wants the extension. They see the pressure that's on them now. You got to keep De'Aaron Fox. You got to keep your young 26-year-old superstar who is going to be a great basketball player for the next decade potentially. So what you did there, if you're Sacramento, was you traded a $6.1 million salary in McDaniels to free up potential cap space. Now, that could come in handy because that trade removed the Kings from the first apron. So now they're a little bit below the salary cap, but they're not in the apron. So they still have flexibility now to make trades, to make moves, to take on more salary than they give up. This is a move where Sacramento could do something interesting, whether that's in the course of the season or at the trade deadline, maybe signing someone in the buyout market. But clearly from that trade, what I learned is the Sacramento Kings are not done. Why? Could it be from the De'Aaron Fox extension? Maybe. Could it be maybe the Kings just want to get better because they see the Western Conference, they see the state of how good that conference is, and they know that they just signed DeMar DeRozan, that they actually have to start winning right now? Potentially. But no matter the reason, this is a team you're going to have to look out for at the trade deadline now with this move. Whether that is going in the direction of maybe trading De'Aaron Fox if things go really downhill, which I highly doubt. But again, this is the NBA. Anything is possible. Or potentially trading some picks, trading some assets to get a better player, potentially fill that shooting guard void. I'm not exactly sure who that particular player could be, but it does not look like that the Sacramento Kings are going to be done with moves. So De'Aaron Fox, the Sacramento Kings freeing up cap space, it's an interesting dynamic, and we will see how it plays out during the rest of the regular season. Now I want to move on to the Philadelphia 76ers because two things were really significant about the 76ers that we found out the other day. Number one, Joel Embiid decides he will not play in any more back-to-backs. He said it directly, quote, Joel Embiid, I don't think I will play any more back-to-backs for the rest of my NBA career. Of course, Joel Embiid has had a significant amount of injuries in his NBA career, missing his first two seasons and pretty much getting injured a significant amount of time during the rest of his career. Joel Embiid is a great player. He is arguably a top 2 center in this league and potentially the best center in this league if he would stay healthy. And now this is a dynamic where is Philadelphia going to be as good as people thought they were going to be in the regular season? I am personally a bigger fan of what Philadelphia did this offseason compared to the New York Knicks, even though Philadelphia has countlessly had disappointments in the playoffs. I was a fan of the Paul George signing. But not only that, what Philadelphia did to their bench, they got Caleb Martin to come. They re-signed Kyle Lowry. They brought in Eric Gordon, re-signed Kelly Oubre Jr., brought in a quality backup center in Drummond, and signed Yuba Swale after he had an amazing Olympics with the French team. Philadelphia had a great offseason. And did I forget to mention drafting Jared McCain, a sharpshooter, to come off the bench for them, rookie out of Duke. Philadelphia, in my opinion, had the best offseason in this NBA 2024 offseason. They were the best team in free agency, and it wasn't even close. Maybe you could say the Knicks had the best offseason. Maybe you could say another team had a better free agency. But to me, how Philadelphia tried to revamp this roster around Joel Embiid to make a contending team, to make a team that competes with the Boston Celtics, I think they did a very good job. Now, the problem is if Embiid is sitting out back-to-backs, right? Let's say you have 13, 14 back-to-backs. How many of those are you going to lose? Really? And considering that Paul George, who we'll get to in a couple of minutes, that he's probably not going to play a lot of back-to-backs either. You're saying the team's just going to be Tyrese Maxey and the rest. How many of those second legs of back-to-backs are you actually going to win? And the East is tight. The East is competitive. Both conferences are competitive. And every single game matters. And home court advantage matters in the playoffs, people. Yes, we've seen a team like the Heat do it as the 8th seed making the NBA Finals, but home court matters. You want that Game 5 when it's 2-2 at your place. You want a Game 7 winner go home at your place. So the home court matters. And if Philadelphia is losing a lot of those back-to-backs and because of Joel Embiid and Paul George are going to be out, then maybe that puts them at a disadvantage. What if they are a 4 or a 5 seed because of losing in the back-to-backs? Then they're forced to play the Celtics in the second round. They want to make the conference finals. They want to be ramping up and play their very best at the end when it matters. Why do you think teams who make runs play better against the best of the best? Because they've had time to prep. They've had the first 2 rounds of playoff experience. Philadelphia, or to be regardless, any team in the Eastern Conference, does not want to see the Boston Celtics until the conference finals. And if Philadelphia loses a lot of games, this could potentially be a problem. And this is not good for the 76ers because there is a lot of pressure on Joel Embiid, probably the most he's had in his career. And that's saying something because we've seen Philadelphia fail countless and countless times. And we've said Embiid has had a lot of pressure, but this is the year. Joel Embiid with this team, which in my opinion is his best team that he has ever had around him, including the 2019 76ers team that featured Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons when he was actually good in his prime, JJ Redick, and many others. Even better than that team, in my opinion. This is the season for the 76ers. It's hard to win back-to-back titles. The 76ers have the team. They have the Celtics killer and Caleb Martin. They have the veterans. They have the scoring. They have the depth. They have it all. What more could you ask for from a roster if you're a 76ers fan? Now it's up to the superstars. And that superstar that has proved it before, making runs, Paul George making the conference finals, competing with the big three when he was in Indiana. He's proven it before that he can compete at a very high level in the postseason. Joel Embiid, he really hasn't proved it yet because he hasn't made it to the conference finals. So there is going to be an immense amount of pressure on him this season, and I hope he stays healthy. And it really sucked that he wasn't healthy for the second half of the season and the first round of the playoffs against the New York Knicks, because I would have loved to see a Joel Embiid fully healthy series against the New York Knicks, because personally, in my opinion, if Embiid was fully healthy, I would have taken the Philadelphia 76ers. That's just me. You can have your own opinion, but that 76ers team was a top 3 seed before Joel Embiid went down. So I hope he stays healthy, but this is a concern for the 76ers like it is every single year. And Joel Embiid is not the only person with health problems. It is Paul George as well. We have seen it with the Clippers, not as much as of course, Kawhi Leonard, because Kawhi Leonard decides to sit out basically every other game in the regular season. Paul George just had his fair share of injuries, and unfortunately, a disappointment in the preseason as Paul George had a left knee injury. He hyperextended his left knee injury in the first half in their preseason game against the Atlanta Hawks. And we don't really know how long this injury is going to be. Some say a couple of weeks. Some say it could potentially be season ending. And this is very, very bad. Do I think this is going to be a season ending injury on his knee? Probably not. But again, if he misses a significant portion of the season, now you have a team without Paul George. Yes, we've seen the team win with just Embiid and Maxey, but remember, Embiid's out on back-to-backs now. So this is a dangerous situation for the 76ers. They don't want to mess around in the regular season. You want to get to that 3 or potentially that 2 slot to have home court advantage in the second round, and you do not want to play the Boston Celtics. And I think Paul George is going to be a big help for the 76ers. Paul George, he said it himself. I don't think he has ever played with both a quality level point guard and a quality level center. And when I mean quality, I mean all-star caliber. Yes, we've seen Paul George play with with just a point guard or just a center in Indiana with Roy Hibbert, just a point guard in Oklahoma City with Russell Westbrook. But the two combined with his 3-and-D wing play, it is the perfect complement. Tyrese Maxey, quick off the ball, give the ball to Paul George. He can create a shot. They decide to double Paul George. They decide to help Paul George get it to Embiid in the post. That is a very dangerous combination. And this team that Paul George is surrounded by may be the best in his career. Of course, you got to give mention to those Indiana Pacers teams. But this is a very, very good team that Paul George is on. And it sucks that he is getting injured. But again, we have seen Paul George, we have seen Joel Embiid get injured in the past, and that is what you have to take when signing Paul George to a 4-year maximum contract. You know he is going to get injured a lot, and this did not help. And I really hope it is not the Tyrese Maxey show again, even though that was very nice last season to see Tyrese Maxey blossom without Joel Embiid, winning most improved player and proving himself as an all-star in this league. That was great and all, but Philadelphia cannot take the regular season like a joke. They actually have to compete. They have a statement game right off the back against the Milwaukee Bucks, against the 76ers former head coach in Doc Rivers. That at home, that is a huge, huge contest for the Philadelphia 76ers, setting the tone right away that we are one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference, beating another top team in the Eastern Conference. And yes, we don't talk about the Milwaukee Bucks that much, but yes, they are a dangerous team. They have Giannis and Damian Lillard. You beat them by a significant amount, the entire conversation goes, whoa, Philadelphia is looking great. And I did mention that even though Paul George is going to be out for probably the start of the regular season, they do have the depth. They do have a guy like Jaron McCain. They do have some other options like Kyle Lowry to step up. They do have Kelly Oubre Jr. probably coming off the bench. So I don't think the depth is going to be an issue, but I think the talent, the scoring level, can it be made up all by Kelly Oubre Jr.? Yes, we've seen it in the past, but can he do it for another season? I don't really know, and I don't really trust Kelly Oubre to do it again. I think he's a great basketball player. Caleb Martin, not really a regular season player, kind of like that one game player where, he's putting up 5 points for maybe like 5 games. Then the 6th game, all of a sudden 20 points. That's Caleb Martin. That's the kind of guy he is. He's very inconsistent, and then one game, all of a sudden, he just cannot miss from the mid-range. So it's going to be difficult for Philadelphia to find a Paul George replacement, at least for the start of the regular season. And you need to get off to a fast start. You look at the schedule, there are some winnable games here at Toronto, at Indiana, after Milwaukee. They should win those games. Detroit hosting Memphis. Philadelphia could easily get off to a 5-0 start and set themselves up for success immediately. But if Paul George is out, Joel Embiid might be out for the early part of the regular season. This is not an ideal situation for the 76ers, and I really do believe that they are the second best team in the Eastern Conference. Not to preview my prediction video that is coming out on Friday, but that is something I will say. Philadelphia is the second best team, and I think in a 7-game series, they will beat the New York Knicks. They will beat the Milwaukee Bucks. They will beat any Eastern Conference team except potentially the Boston Celtics. And I may even pick the 76ers because I know how hard it is to go back-to-back because we have 6 different champions in 6 years. But at the end of the day, in order for the 76ers to succeed, just like every other team, but it really, really needs to happen this year for the 76ers because this is the window. This is the best team they've ever had. This next 2 to 3 years is the championship window for Joel Embiid. They have to stay healthy, period. I want to move on, though, and I want to get to some uplifting news about Lonzo Ball, as reports say he is going to be returning in Wednesday's preseason game against the Minnesota Timberwolves for the first time since January 2022. It has been 2.5 years since we have seen Lonzo Ball take the court. Lonzo Ball averaged 13 points per game, 5.5 rebounds per game, and 5 assists per game when he last played with the Chicago Bulls. And this is an uplifting story because Lonzo Ball, such a great facilitator, such a great point guard. He is a kind of a point guard that you would want on your team. He is a selfless guy. He is not going to take all the shots. He has very high basketball IQ if you haven't seen from just watching his highlights, even though I don't think highlights are a great evaluation of a player's game. Just by watching those, you can tell that Lonzo Ball has very, very high IQ, and he is an intelligent player who could be in this league for a very long time. And after he had the multiple left knee surgeries, reports said he couldn't even bend his knee. And most people, including myself, thought he was done. His career was over. He was already starting his podcast with his brother. It looked like he was moving on to the next chapter of his life. But this is one for the ages. And when Lonzo Ball steps on the floor in that preseason game, he is going to get a loud and tremendous standing ovation because it's hard to come back from any injury. But 3 knee surgeries, that is not only difficult, but that is something not a lot of humans could accomplish. And you have to just smile and embrace the moment of this young gentleman getting an opportunity to do what he loves. And what was interesting about this entire injury debacle, going back to the old Chicago Bulls, well, not really old, but last year's Chicago Bulls when they had DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, of course, still in the mix now, Vucevic as well. In 2022, before Lonzo went down, the 2021-22 Chicago Bulls were the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. They got jumped by Miami close to the All-Star break, but before Lonzo Ball went down, the Bulls were the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. And after that, it went all downhill, and Chicago was the 6th seed, lost to the Bucks in 5. Then the last 2 years, they were the 9 seed, made it to the play-in second round against the 8 seed Miami Heat and lost those games 2 years in a row. And Chicago has been nothing but a team in the middle of the pack. So the fact that they were the 1 seed and it's pretty much gone downhill from there. Shows how impactful Lonzo Ball actually was for the Bulls. Now, this is going to be an interesting dynamic now of where Lonzo Ball is going to fit, because I don't think he is going to start, because, of course, Chicago made the move to trade Alex Caruso and get Josh Giddey, which I didn't think was actually a terrible, as bad of a move as people started out to be. I think it's a win-win trade for both sides. I think the Thunder getting Caruso, adding to the defense, a good guy to have on a contending team, a veteran on that young team, and then giving up Josh Giddey, which for the Thunder was fine because they already had Shea and Jalen Williams, and Chicago gets a new starting point guard. Josh Giddey doesn't have to worry about other starting point guards in the mix. It's his keys. He has the basketball. The keys, the convertibles keys of the Chicago Bulls are right in his hands. So I think Josh Giddey could have a potential breakout season. Of course, Kobe White is going to be starting. Zach LaVine obviously going to be in that lineup. So where does that put Lonzo Ball? It probably puts him off the bench. Now, what are we going to see of Lonzo Ball? Is he going to be the same player that he was? Who knows? Because it has been 2.5 years, and it is really hard to come back from major injuries. We've seen players who have been spectacular. For example, a Derrick Rose. Then he suffers a major injury, comes back, still good, but not necessarily the same player that he was before the injury. So I hope Lonzo Ball is still making incredible passes, still has that high IQ on the basketball court, and impacts winning the way he used to impact winning a few years back. And he will probably be paired with Ayo Dosunmu, Mateus Buzelis, their first-round draft pick, along with Torrey Craig. Obviously, we know this Bulls team is probably not going anywhere this season, and they should be glad and happy that they did trade DeMar DeRozan to the Sacramento Kings, because, again, as I mentioned, that team was in the middle of the pack. And where do you not want to be? You don't want to be in that 8 to 10 seed range where you're in that play-in tournament. You're not really contending, but you're not really in contention to get the number 1 pick in the draft lottery. So Chicago now going to a rebuild mode, looking to capture the flag, no pun intended there. And we will see how Chicago does. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bulls do end up trading Nikola Vucevic, looking to try to trade Zach LaVine, even though that looks impossible because of his contract. And they'll probably have to throw in a first-round pick if they want a team to take on Zach LaVine's contract, even though we know he is an all-star caliber player. So we will see what Chicago does at the trade deadline with some of their veteran players still left on the team. But for now, I like the direction of the Bulls. I think Lonzo will be a great addition to this young rebuilding team, and I am glad he is back on the basketball court. Now let's go to our final thing of the day, which is the GM survey reaction. Of course, this happens every single NBA season, where all the GMs, major executives, they come out and have a survey answering 50 questions about the NBA season, and I will go individually down this list. I'm not going to go every question because some of the questions are absolutely ridiculous and they're just not necessary to talk about, but some of them really give you a sense of how these executives feel like the league is going to shape out this year, and some of it may surprise you, some of it may not, as expected, but I'm going to react to it myself. First question is, what team will win the 2025 NBA Finals? Now, this one's pretty obvious. Without even looking at the survey, I think most people think that the Celtics are going to go back-to-back, most dominant team in the NBA. They're bringing their entire team back. Yes, Kristaps Porzingis is going to be out until January, but we know Al Horford can fill the load as the starting center until he returns. And then the postseason, if the Celtics are all healthy, no major injuries, they should be right back in contention with that elite 7-man rotation of Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Porzingis, Horford, 8-man rotation, Pritchard, and Sam Hauser. And the Celtics will be back in contention. And 83% of the GMs believe that the Celtics will repeat. The second team, not the Dallas Mavericks, not the Minnesota Timberwolves, but the Oklahoma City Thunder. And this one's a little bit of an interesting one to me personally, because I do believe the Thunder will get the 1 seed in the regular season, once again winning the regular season title of the Western Conference. They did lose in the second round, and they are still a very young team with lack of playoff experience. I think at the end of the day, some of the teams still may be better than them in the postseason. But I think the GMs really respected and really valued the moves of acquiring veteran players such as I mentioned earlier, Alex Caruso, and signing Isaiah Hartenstein in free agency. So I do think GMs are valuing that, which is why I can somewhat understand the move. But I do believe there are Western Conference teams who could potentially get to the finals other than the Oklahoma City Thunder. The third team with 3% of the votes was the Dallas Mavericks, the team that lost to the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals in 5 games. Of course, as you know, the Dallas Mavericks bringing in Klay Thompson, bringing in Quentin Grimes from the Pistons, trading Tim Hardaway Jr., getting Najee Marshall from the Pelicans while retaining the rest of their roster. And this is a Mavericks team that is probably on for a vengeance. They were just not ready to face the Boston Celtics, and they have a very good team. Now, the key is going to be Klay Thompson. Can he not get back to where he was in his prime, but get to a position where he's putting up 15 points per game on efficient shooting to help that Mavericks offense? And I think he's a very underrated defender as well. So we will see how he plays. We will see how the development of PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively, along with some other young guys go. But this Mavericks team will be back, and they will be contending in the Western Conference. Now, the Eastern Conference rankings. Teams believe that the same 7 that got the top 7 seeds last year in the Eastern Conference will be the top 7 of this year, with, in no particular order, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Milwaukee, Orlando, and Indiana all getting back into the playoff field. Boston is the 1, New York's the 2, Philadelphia they think is the 3, Cleveland the 4, Milwaukee the 5, Orlando the 6, and Indiana the 7. And I do think that it's interesting that they put Cleveland at the 4 seed, considering the Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis and Dame, and putting Orlando and Indiana all the way back. But, of course, I'm not going to say a lot because, as I mentioned earlier, my prediction video will be on Friday. But that's how the GM survey believes the top 7 will be, and I don't think that is a real bad top 7 right there. Now, the Western Conference, in this order, the top 7 are Oklahoma City, Minnesota, Denver, Dallas, Phoenix, Memphis, New Orleans, and they actually have an 8 seed, Golden State. No Lakers, no Clippers, no Rockets. So there are some teams that are being left out here, and it's not because they're not bad. It's just because the Western Conference is that elite, and I'm going to, of course, save my opinions, but those are just the top 8 seeds if you're curious. The field also projects that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the Oklahoma City Thunder will win the 24-25 Kia MVP, and I tend to agree with them. If I had to judge of people who are thinking who's going to win MVP, I would say most people are going to think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I'm not going to tell you who I think, but 40% of people think it's going to be SGA, and I completely agree that most people probably think that. Second is Luka Doncic with the Mavericks, which is understandable. Embiid and Jokic and Tatum are all tied at 3 with 7% of the votes. Now, of course, as I mentioned, Joel Embiid, if he's not playing back-to-backs, he probably won't win MVP. Jason Tatum, of course, is on there as the motivation factor of Team USA, getting benched, obviously, the whole Steve Kerr debacle. Man, is that Warriors-Celtics series going to be great this year. And remember, Jaylen Brown also didn't make that Olympics team. A lot of motivation coming out of the Celtics superstars against the Golden State Warriors. That is going to be a great one. So I think part of the reason why the GMs put this, maybe because of the motivation of the Olympics. And then, of course, you have Nikola Jokic, who's always going to be in the mix for an MVP. Next question. If you're starting a franchise today and you could sign any player in the NBA, who would it be? Now, I'm a little bit surprised about this one personally. I think if you had to guess, I would say Luka Doncic should be number 1. But the GMs believe that Victor Wembanyama is number 1. And, of course, Victor Wembanyama is going to be a superstar. He is an elite 7'6" big man that is one of the future faces of the league. But Luka Doncic is still very, very young, and he is super elite at this level. And he may be the best player in the NBA for a long time. That is how good Luka Doncic is. So I don't really understand why he is not first. He has 3% of the votes. Shai Gilgeous and Nikola Jokic are tied with 10% of the votes in second place. But that one perplexes me a little bit because I think Luka would be better. Which player is most likely to have a breakout season in 24-25, which basically means which player will win the most improved player award. The GMs have a variety of players here. They actually have a lot of players. Jalen Williams of the Thunder coming at number one. I don't understand that one a lot because Jalen Williams had a huge jump last season, becoming clearly one of the top three players on the Oklahoma City roster. Maybe he'll have another leap to becoming an all-star. Who knows? But I don't really see him being number one. They have Evan Mobley as number two, which I don't really get. John Morant also tied for number two, and Victor Wembanyama. I don't really get some of these most improved. I would feel like in reality, when you're predicting the most improved, I would say that if you're going to look at that, which player is going to have a bigger role and which player is primed based on the players surrounding him for more success than he had last year. That is who I think should be in the most improved conversation. And I think Derek Lively could be a part of that conversation. I think even a Keegan Murray. How about Andrew Nemar? Great playoffs last year, not decent regular season. Maybe he converts his playoff performances into regular season performances this season. Those are the kind of players who I would think about for the most improved, not the ones the GMs are really saying. They think Luka Doncic is the best point guard in the NBA ahead of SGA. I completely understand that to a point, but I think there is a little bit of a debate on that considering the way Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has carried that Oklahoma City Thunder team to where they are today. But don't really mind that. Curry and Brunson getting votes as well. Anthony Edwards, the best shooting guard in the NBA. Absolutely no disputes about that. Devin Booker, even SGA getting some votes there. Steph Curry and Luka getting votes also. But Anthony Edwards by far, I think we saw it in the postseason. We see his demeanor. We see his attitude. We see his swag. We see his confidence. Best shooting guard in the league. No disputes. They think Jason Tatum ahead of Kevin Durant, LeBron James is the best small forward in the NBA. Now that one is up for debate to me because I think you can make the argument that Kevin Durant and LeBron are still a little bit better than Jason Tatum. Of course, they're getting a lot older. I think it could be a little bit closer. The margin is by 30%. So maybe Tatum is the best. I mean, it's still a debate, but it shouldn't be that wide of a margin. Best power forward, Giannis, not even close. Anthony Davis getting some votes. Even Draymond Green getting some votes. But Giannis got 77% of the votes. Absolutely agreeable there. Best center, Nikola Jokic, 87%. Joel Embiid following him with 10, and Victor Wembanyama 3%. Jokic, because of Embiid's health, is clearly the best center. And I think even if Embiid was fully healthy, I still think Jokic would be the best center by a small margin. Moving on to some offseason moves. Teams thought the Oklahoma City Thunder made the best offseason moves, which I tend to disagree with. As I mentioned earlier, Philadelphia, in my opinion, had the best moves by re-signing all their players and adding multiple veteran pieces. The Thunder only acquired 2 guys in the offseason. So Philadelphia did follow up the Thunder at second place with 33% of the votes. New York at third with 20% of the votes. I understand New York at 3, but Philadelphia, in my opinion, as I mentioned earlier, should be number 1. Paul George, they think will make the biggest impact. That one's pretty clear and obvious. The most underrated player acquisition. Now, this one is believed to be Alex Caruso, but I tend to think it is going to be Kentavious Caldwell-Pope because I think we all know what Alex Caruso brings to the table. A defensive guy, someone who can score from beyond deep, someone who is going to bring IQ, bring veteran presence to a team. KCP, really under the radar signing for the Magic. I don't think a lot of people were talking about that acquisition, and we saw what KCP did with the Denver Nuggets, his three-point percentage and his impact offensively for that championship team in 2023. So I think KCP is being left a little bit under the radar. He is second place with 17%. Hartenstein with the Thunder also third place, 13%. And Tyus Jones, 13% as well. And I also think Tyus Jones is going to be have a huge impact for the Phoenix Suns. He's a little bit under the radar. The market didn't really work out for him, didn't really get the money he wanted, and decides to go with the Suns, a team that desperately needed a point guard after last year, and I think he's going to help that offense with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal a significant amount. Which team overall will be most improved? Pretty obvious, the Memphis Grizzlies because of their injuries. San Antonio, second place. Philadelphia, third place. I do not mind that. I would probably put even Houston up there if you could, but I don't really mind those three teams. Most surprising move of the offseason, Karl-Anthony Towns to New York. I would tend to agree with that. Who will win the Rookie of the Year? Most people believe it's going to be Reed Sheppard from the Houston Rockets, with Zach Edey following, Stephon Castle at third, and some other people, Alex Sarr, Ron Holland, got some votes. I don't think it's going to be Reed Sheppard because I think there's a lot of pieces on that Houston Rockets roster. I'm still trying to debate before I make that predictions video on Friday who will be my Rookie of the Year, but I don't think it's going to be Reed Sheppard. Which rookie was the biggest steal from where they were selected in the draft? Most people think it's between Bud Carrington, Devin Carter, Johnny Furphy, Dalton Connett, Terrence Shannon Jr., and Nikola Topic. Six-way tie at 10% of the votes. I would even throw Khalil Ware on there, even though he wasn't on this list, considering they won the Summer League and how well he did. I do like the Dalton Connett pick. I think Terrence Shannon's also going to be great. I can't really evaluate Nikola Topic, and I don't know why a lot of people are voting because I don't think he's going to be playing a lot this season for the Thunder. I think he's actually injured. But I like the list. I would probably add Khalil Ware to it as well. The best defensive player in the NBA, they think Victor Wembanyama already, which is, I would say, maybe jumping the gun a little too early. Bam Adebayo following. If I had to a tie with Gobert and Holiday, if I had to put someone, I would personally put Bam Adebayo. Don't mind the Victor Wembanyama poll in his second year, but I think Bam's versatility everywhere, I think he is personally the best defender in the NBA, but Wembanyama is a very close second in my opinion, so I don't really mind that. They think Drew Holiday is the best perimeter defender. Absolutely agree with that move. They think Giannis over Bam is the most versatile defender. A little bit odd to me. OG Anunoby up there as well, which I agree with, but I don't think Giannis is the most versatile defender. I think it's Bam Adebayo, not Giannis. I think OG deserves to be up there as well. Maybe Giannis in the top three. Also, I would like to see Herb Jones. Herb Jones only got 7% of the votes. I think he deserves a little bit more praise there. Coaches, who was the best head coach in the NBA? Eric Spoelstra. Best motivator of the people, Eric Spoelstra. Best in-game adjustments, Tyronn Lue. Best defensive schemes, head coach Eric Spoelstra. Most of the people think Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the league. And a couple of others. Which active player will be the best head coach someday? I would say Chris Paul, and the people agree. 30% of the GMs think Chris Paul will be the best NBA head coach. And which team's level of success, the last one we're going to do today, which team's level of success this season is the toughest to predict? I'll give you three teams without looking at the list. I'd say the Lakers. I would say the Heat. And I would probably say the Suns. Okay, they have the Lakers at 1. They have the Suns at 4 with 10% of the votes. And the Heat received a little bit of votes, but not a lot. I think the Heat should be more up there. The Rockets are a decent one as well because of their young and rising core. How good could they potentially be? But they could also be in the same position as last year, so I understand that. And that is it today. That is my evaluation of the GM survey right there. And that is everything I needed to discuss with you today on the Take Your Shot podcast. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, please leave a like and subscribe and follow my Instagram at take_your_shot_podcast_. That's at take_your_shot_podcast_ and tell me that you would have taken your shots on my takes. That's all my shots for the week. Prediction video Friday, coming out with everything from in-season tournament, awards, regular season standings, playoff matchups, playoff predictions. That's all coming up on Friday, so I will see you then.